I want to make the claim in this video that deconstruction is an honorable thing and that helping people deconstruct knowledge, I'm not just talking about evangelical Christianity, but I will in a minute, but helping people deconstruct is also an honorable thing. One of the comments I get fairly regularly on my videos is somebody saying something along the lines of, so what? Like, you want to prove the Bible has a mistake in it. Like, what good does that do? Why don't you do something useful? Why don't you whatever, maybe it's like something to do with Christianity or just humanity. I get some version of the claim often that basically somebody will say, I'm wasting my time by pointing out the problems with a system or with a tradition or with a faith. But I want to talk through why this reaction is actually really wrong and why there is a certain kind of nobility in deconstruction. And I think it's interesting, like we often forget this deconstruction as it's come to be used and thrown around by evangelical Christians. This idea originally came from postmodernist philosophy. And when you looked at postmodernist philosophy, one of the main thrusts, I guess I could say, of like Michel Foucault's work is the connection between knowledge and power, that any kind of knowledge, anything that is known is ultimately also implicated in power. And because knowledge is power, like structures of knowledge, the things we know also have an impact on people and hold real power over people's lives. And I think there's no better example of this than faith, because when we have ideas about faith, these ideas don't just exist in a vacuum. They're not just things we think in our head. They're not just, nice maxims that help us live our life. They have very real consequences in the real world. Knowledge always enacts on people. And one of the interesting things as I look at Christianity and critiquing a lot of the ways that specifically Western Christianity has come to formalize knowledge is that knowledge is always intricately wound up with power. Now, Christianity as a whole has a lot of different power structures in it, but evangelicalism's power structure in many ways is actually the doctrine of inerrancy. That becomes the power structure when you focus on a text that a certain group of people believes that gives them the monopoly on understanding God. And of course, they're the ones who interpret it. And of course, they're the ones who enact that power structure on other people. So in a very real way, by pointing out that the Bible is not inerrant, it's not just about like questioning or not doing anything constructive. It really is constructive, because that entire power system of evangelicalism that is capable of doing so much harm is directly based on this idea that the Bible is the inerrant word of God. Knowledge is power. Ideas have implications. One of the things that gets wrapped up in a belief of inerrancy is often then people who claim to understand, people who claim to be able to interpret. And interpret. And from interpreting, they often then use that knowledge, that power structure to act on other people. And this happens in every church. It happens in every family. It happens in every relationship. When you have two people, say I'm a Christian and there's somebody at my work and who I think is not a Christian and I want to convert them, which is a very real thing that happened in my past life, there's a power dynamic then implicated in that relationship. If there's a parent who believes that their faith tells them to spare the rod and spoil the child, that then is a very real power structure with like very real world implications. I think it's funny that a lot of people who defend the power structures the most are the ones who are benefiting from it. And I talk, for example, a lot about apologists. And apologists fundamentally, as I understand them, and I'm talking specifically about a certain type of evangelical apologist that I've engaged with most of my life and now on this channel, apologetics, these are people who make money proving that a certain worldview is true. So again, like that is knowledge. They're talking about knowledge and faith, but implicated in that there is power. And again, those ideas enact on people. We've already talked about that. So the thing is, when you look at a system, the people often benefiting from the system are the ones who are going to hold on to it the tightest. One of the most common ways to benefit is from actual like material or social benefits. Like if a pastor gets paid, if a man guards a position of male leadership and says men are called to be leaders by God, that then gives him a calling and gives him a sense of purpose and gives him a place in this structure of authority. So that whole kind of knowledge system has real power implications. And the people at the bottom, I think it's really interesting, as I reflect on this growing up as a fundamentalist kid, the amount of work that was done by these people in authority to prop up this authority system, but to often do so by converting children and by spending a lot of time and energy converting. And they were just saying they were training up children, but often what they were doing is trying to convert neighborhood children with BBSs, trying to basically convert all the kids they possibly could to this religion, which doesn't always hold up later in life. Not all those people stayed, certainly. Some of them did. But the point is that power structure was very top down. It's very hierarchical in a lot of ways. Now, mind you, there's been some other super interesting work, like in religious studies. I could point to somebody like the famous one is Antonio Gramsci, who says that people come to have a stake with the power structures that dominate them. There was also a famous scholar of religion, Saba Mahmoud. Saba Mahmoud studied the women's mosque movement in Egypt, and she argued that Muslim women didn't just mindlessly submit to tradition, but actually they had a lot of agency within that, and that they would exercise that within the tradition. She argued that women could often become the most prominent guardians of a traditional religion. So there are some ways to think about these power structures that recognize that there are nuances within, and there's different ways to exercise agency within power structures and all that sort of thing. But when we talk about deconstruction, we are often talking about people for whom agency means it's time to leave. And when you look at deconstruction, then deconstruction isn't just about pulling apart your beliefs. It's not just about deciding okay, I don't believe in substitutionary atonement anymore. I don't believe in hell, or maybe I don't even believe in God anymore. Deconstruction is actually pushing back and trying to understand why this power structure had a hold on you, why it was able to impact on your life in such a serious and strong way. And that could manifest in abuse. It could manifest in manipulation. It could manifest in toxic control. It could even just manifest in weird beliefs that you thought you had to have because you were trained to think about purity culture as something you had to hold, or you were trained to think about the end times as something you had to believe that Jesus is going to come back and everyone's going to disappear. Deconstructing any kind of knowledge has the ability to undermine the way that knowledge-based power systems operate on people. And in the case of Christian deconstruction, there's one word that I think really summarizes what is happening, and this is freedom. People are pushing back from ideological systems that were built to control them, basically built to fence them in, and people are coming to terms with what those systems are deconstructing them, are pushing back, and are finding freedom. And it's interesting to me, and it's something I've reflected a lot on personally, because we talked a lot about freedom when I was a kid. When the Bible talks about freedom, if the Son has set you free, you shall be free indeed. We really just thought that was talking about freedom from some sort of, absolute hell after death, maybe going to be in heaven with Jesus. That's freedom, essentially, freedom from the penalty of sin. But actually, I never really experienced a sense of profound freedom until I left Christianity. That was the moment that I felt free. And I'm always thinking about this because I'm doing this work online, and you don't always know what's going to happen. You put your ideas out into the world, and the same idea that saves somebody's life might be the same idea that really dramatically hurts somebody. And it's hard. It's hard to do. I mean, everybody who puts ideas into the world has to deal with this, I think. So it's hard to know where this is going to go. But one of the things that I see again and again is that people actually need to be set free from fundamentalism, from evangelicalism. This is my tradition. It's true in other religious traditions. People need to be set free from the more fundamentalist forms of any religion, or the more fundamentalist ideologies of any ideology. We do need to be set free. And when I make these arguably silly little videos that talk about problems with the Bible, or that talk about things Jesus never said, or relatively pithy, silly little videos that I really enjoy making because I think the topic's fun, when I make these videos, it has the potential to set people free, because this is the information that undermined the knowledge structure that had a hold on me when I was younger, and it set me free. And to me, that's why deconstruction is actually a really honorable and good thing. If I wanted to theologize it, I would even say that deconstruction is actually essential to the core of the Christian message, that all throughout history there has been deconstruction. You could even argue that Jesus was a deconstructor in a lot of ways. And that same Jesus who stands in the temple and reads from the Hebrew Bible about setting the captive free, that message, I think, can have some serious resonance with people who are deconstructing systems that have had power over them. Freedom, to actually be free, setting the captives free. This is a powerful central tool to the Christian message. And I do think there's often an understanding that that freedom is from sin. But what is a fundamentally oppressive system if it's not sin? And being set free from a fundamentally oppressive system, which is what evangelical fundamentalist was for me and is for many, many people, what is being set free from that? That actually sounds like a Christian prerogative if you say it like that. And coming back to deconstruction, I think that makes deconstruction a really honorable thing. I find when I put out these videos, people will push back against my ideas as much as they're able to. And then they get to a point where they can't, if they don't know or whatever. And then the response is, well, what good is it? Who are you giving people hope to? And I actually think setting people free does give people a lot of hope. That deconstruction does give people a lot of hope. It can be really, really hard. It can be incredibly difficult to pull apart things that you've been socialized to believe. And the things that this power structure has literally has had a really real impact on your life. It can be incredibly difficult to pull that apart, but it really does give people hope. But there's one more part to this. And to talk about this, I want to talk more kind of generically about deconstruction and about postmodernism, because I think what happened as postmodernist thought kind of moved into the university, it kind of a lot of people think postmodernism is and even when I was an evangelical, it was a bad word. Postmodernism isn't really anything concrete, or it's not supposed to be. But what I think tended to happen in universities, and this was certainly the experience of my my university life, is that we did go through a lot of deconstruction, and that meant decentralizing, the old white guys who write and dominate history, for example, or the English canon, or I was humanities, always in the humanities, and you get movements. Also like post-colonialism, for example, which is really powerful and important. So I think the one thing I learned about deconstruction watching it happen in university is that it's really, really important. It's vital because it fundamentally can undo these implicit power structures and knowledge that do hurt people and act on people and set people free. Okay, I already said all that. But I think where there is a limit to deconstruction, I think where there is a problem is that we struggle to reconstruct. I think if anything, and this is notorious in the university too, but it's also true in Christianity. For a lot of people, it's not always apparent that you go through a period of deconstruction, but there should then come a period of reconstruction after too. Deconstruction is a critique. It's not necessarily a place that you live your whole life. I think what happened in the universities, in a lot of my exposure to knowledge, we got really good at pulling things apart and not really good at putting things back together. Not really good at, picking up the pieces again and looking for whatever, the true, the good, or the beautiful, or whatever it is. Going and finding again how you can reconstruct something positive and concrete, whether it's your faith or whether it's, an appreciation for beauty, or whether it's a tradition you can belong to. But I think what we actually do need to come to after a period of deconstruction is a period of reconstruction. And maybe that is celebrating your identity in a healthy way. Maybe that is reconnecting to your roots. For me, it was recognizing that Christianity, and for me, it was the Anglican tradition, recognizing that was part of my roots that I wanted to connect to again. That's the beginning of reconstruction. In a university setting, for me, for example, as a historian, I remember reading a lot of postmodernist historiography. So we would have all this kind of humility about we can't say anything about history, and our ideas of history are so problematic. And then to some extent though, you just have to stop and recognize the limits of your knowledge and just go try and do something anyway. And I think that's kind of sort of where we come to in life. After deconstructing, it's time to rebuild. It's time to go and explore, and it's time to go see what else is out there. And maybe you're not looking. I think some people do still want to go look for some kind of objectively universal truth. I struggle with that, and maybe that's just my postmodernist voice talking. But go find what's meaningful to you. Once you've been set free, you have the rest of your life to live, and life is relatively short and relatively long. Short enough that you best get busy while you can, but long enough that you still have a lot of time. Even if you're 40 or 50 or 60, you have a lot of time to go and explore and to find what in the human tradition is moving to you, what in your tradition, in your ancestry, in a tradition that has nothing to do with you, like the tradition down the street that you're just going to go and drop in on, like the conversation with the stranger. Try to serve people. There are things within the Christian message that have so much potential for our own happiness and sociability, like finding community and, giving food to the hungry and caring for people and helping in whatever way we can. We spend so much time trying to figure out if there objectively is a God out there or something. What would actually happen if I showed up for somebody else today in a way that answered their prayers, in a way that made them thankful, in a way that made them believe a little bit more in something, whether it's God or humanity. Those are the kinds of things I don't think we spend enough time thinking about. There's nothing wrong with deconstruction. There's nothing wrong with challenging the knowledge that acts on people. I make these videos and they often seem to be the ones that do best. And I get it because it's an emotional thing. Like so many of us know what it feels like to be, for lack of a better word, trapped in a certain ideology and wanting to get free, and finally getting free and being like, there's a famous allegory of the cave by Plato, like being like the person who comes blinking up into the sun and like sees for the first time that there's a real world all around that you never noticed before. But then after that, it's easy to be cynical. It's easy to say like, I'm not going to be taken in again. I'm never going to trust again. I'm never going to be religious again. I'm not going to listen to anybody who thinks they know what's going on in the world. Like, it's easy to be cynical when you've been lied to. It's easy to be cynical when you pulled that structure of knowledge apart and you've seen behind the curtain and you understand that all knowledge, or what we could call epistemology, that all epistemology is not perfect. But at the same time, if we can see that and recognize that we can try anyways, that we can try to know, we can try to explore, we can try to understand, whether it's things about ourselves, maybe it's a religious tradition, things about God. If you can come through a process of deconstruction, take some time to mourn, but don't spend your life there. Like, move on. Take the next step to rebuilding, to moving on. Deconstruction is an honorable first step, but it's not the end. It's never the end. It's always just the first step of getting free, and you have the rest of your life to figure out what's next. You have the rest of your life to figure out who you are and what's good and what moves you and who you want to be. And I think that that is one of the most beautiful things. And to deconstruct and come get the freedom that comes with deconstructing, and imagine like having that freedom and not doing anything with it. Do something with it. You have complete intellectual freedom when you deconstruct. Go and build something beautiful, change some lives, help some people, sharpen your brain, do some studying, whatever. Lean into that freedom and see where it will take you, because it's incredible where life can take you once you're open to that. I hope that was interesting to you. Let me know what you think. As always, I'll see you next time.